From soaring skyscrapers to historic buildings transformed into modern marvels, in today's video, we're going to count down the top 15 most incredible penthouses and apartments in the world. Let's begin with number 15, the shape-shifting apartment. At just 475 square feet, this apartment in Portugal is pretty tiny. However, it makes up for it with its unique shape-shifting abilities. You see, in between the living/dining room and the bedroom, there's a moving wall. This wall can be adjusted so that either room is larger, depending on who's in it. This ensures that the area that's actually in use has more space, making the apartment feel larger than it actually is. Number 14, the Ritz-Carlton Penthouse. Unless you live under a rock, chances are that you know the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain is top tier. However, what you may not know is that Ritz-Carlton has a penthouse suite in New York that's a step above their usual offerings. Coming in at $118.5 million, it consists of a total of 3 units across the top 2 floors, with all 3 being sold as one package. The end result is a 15,000 square foot apartment with 4 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a massive terrace, and about 120 meters of windows. Number 13, the Fire Station Apartment. Nothing is quite like a trip to Disneyland, and in a perfect world, many would absolutely love the chance to live there. Walt Disney himself felt no different, and when designing the park, he decided to build an apartment inside the firehouse building for him and his family. Built in a Victorian-era style complete with tons of red and gold finishings, the small-ish 5,000 square foot space was both lavish and comfortable. However, the Disney family no longer uses the apartment, and nowadays this piece of Disney history can be visited on tours of the park. Number 12, 1000 Museum Penthouse. Miami's easily one of America's most up-and-coming cities, and so it makes sense that she chose the city to build one of her only American works, the 1000 Museum Penthouse. Filled with luxury apartments, the whole building is an incredible place to live. However, its penthouses are what really steals the show. While there are multiple from floors 50 to 59, each is absolutely massive as they take up an entire floor and come in at about 10,000 square feet. These penthouses come with a gym, a helipad access, and top-tier appliances, of course, and as a result, they regularly command prices in the $10 to $20 million range. Number 11, the Presidential Unit. Designed by famed architect Frank Gehry, Hongqing's Opus is the pinnacle of luxury. Engineered to seamlessly blend into its surroundings, this 12-story apartment building has just 12 units, with the first 2 floors being double-floor units and the other 10 taking up 1 floor each. However, the Presidential Unit right at the top is the most impressive of them all. Coming in just shy of 5,450 square feet, the apartment comes complete with a 1,500-foot balcony, jacuzzi, 4 powder rooms, and of course 2 parking spaces. This combination of size, location, and amenities is probably why it sold for a whopping $66 million back in 2015, making it one of the most expensive apartments in Asia. Number 10, Penthouse B. A certain Mr. Nick Candy is considered to be one of England's biggest real estate tycoons, and in 2021 he decided to list one of his most high-profile properties for the not-so-modest sum of $247 million. It's located at 1 Hyde Park in London. The massive penthouse offers uninterrupted views of the entire park, and it's an opulent trophy project that Mr. Candy has finally decided to cash in on. Managed by real estate agencies Savills and Knight Frank, the 5-bedroom home spans 18,000 square feet, and it comes complete with a reception room, 2 studies, a champagne room with enough space for 750 temperature-controlled bottles, a cocktail bar, a home cinema, a gym, a spa, sauna, 2 wraparound terraces, and, of all things, a manicure and pedicure area. The main bedroom's also a marvel to behold, as it includes 2 identical baths clad in Nero Marquina marble, with the her bath having its black marble floors contrasted by white marble-covered walls, while the opposite is true for the him bath. This leaves us with one question: why did Mr. Candy decide to sell this place? Well, according to an official statement by the real estate company selling the property, Mr. Candy hoped to, quote, capitalize on this inbound interest and the huge pent-up demand from overseas buyers as COVID restrictions ease and international travel resumes, end quote. Now, in a likely bid to maintain buyer privacy, whether or not the penthouse has been sold is still not clear. However, given how attractive the location is, I wouldn't be surprised if it was. Number 9. The Radio City Music Hall Apartment. If you're well-versed in the arts, then you've probably heard of New York City's Radio City Music Hall. Built all the way back in 1932 by the uber-rich Rockefeller family, it quickly became famous for its grand and glamorous shows, and ever since its opening, more than 300 million visitors have visited to watch shows and balk at its incredible Art Deco style. However, what many people don't realize is that this elegant showplace also has its own secret apartment. You see, it's theater impresario Samuel Roxy Rothafel, who's largely credited with making Radio City as famous as it is. In a show of thanks, architect Edward Durrell Stone and interior designer Donald Deskey built him an apartment inside the building. Lavishly detailed in the same Art Deco style downstairs, it's complete with high ceilings, gold leaf finishings, and windows decorated floor to ceiling with plush drapes. It is here that Rothafel would entertain only the most high-profile of guests, with most notable names including Olivia de Havilland, Samuel Goldwyn, Alfred Hitchcock, Judy Garland, and Walt Disney. However, the apartment wasn't used for long. That's because in 1936, Roxy died after living there for just 4 years. As a result, the apartment lay unused. Thankfully, this didn't mean it was all forgotten. After all, the apartment's been well-maintained and is in pristine condition to this very day. Despite this, the so-called Roxy Suite is no longer lived in, and while it can be rented out for luxury events, it can be seen while on a tour of the Radio City building. It's no longer possible to stay there long-term. Number 8. 25 Verda. For years, Torino had a reputation of being a rather industrial city. As the heartland of important Italian companies such as Fiat and Lavazza, it was here that factories would pump out products and emissions would be let out into the air like there was no tomorrow. Therefore, it's somewhat fitting that an effort to create a clean living space was created in this center of innovation. Known as 25 Verda, the apartments in this complex are an experiment in bioengineering. While the building's bones have a rusted industrial style that pays homage to the city, many of the apartments have large terraces that are filled with native species of plants, giving the look of a tree taking root in an abandoned factory kind of way. These planters give a community vibe, as most of the residents are on board in the sense that they are deeply devoted to tending to gardens and creating beautiful green spaces. This setup also has very functional purposes. After all, the terraces extended the living areas, the sunlight filters in between the wood planks, and the plants offer shade, absorb noise, and give each resident their own forest oasis. They also create an ecosystem wherein energy, heat, and rainwater is recovered and reused, allowing for its storage and subsequent reuse for irrigation of green areas. In fact, the whole apartment is so green that it's completely carbon neutral. After all, while it produces 5 tons of carbon dioxide per year, it absorbs 5 tons of this carbon dioxide as well. Therefore, in an area that's otherwise quiet and industrial, the 63 apartments that make up this place add a bit of greenery and happiness to the lives of those who live there. Moving on to number 7, the New York Public Library System. In the early 1900s, philanthropist and steel magnate Andrew Carnegie made quite the splash when he donated the modern equivalent of about $100 million to the city of New York. The reason? He wanted the city to build new libraries for the benefit of those who live there. Given that this was the early 1900s, these libraries were heated with coal. This was a problem because in order for the library to be heated 24/7, someone had to be on hand to maintain the furnaces 24/7. It was because of this that apartments were built in each and every library so that someone could be on hand to do that job. This someone was the so-called building superintendent, and they would usually move in alongside with their family. While the apartments varied in size from library to library, they were usually on the top floor and often quite large. In many instances, these apartments would have been prime real estate for those who live there and would have been far too expensive for the families who live there to rent had they not been specially set aside for them. However, in the 1970s and 1980s, the coal furnaces began to be upgraded to more modern setups, while the superintendents who lived there were allowed to stay. As they began to retire, the apartments slowly began to be abandoned. As a result, many of these apartments began to be renovated for use as a program or storage space. Today, so many have been converted that there are only 13 apartments left in the entire New York Public Library system. In all likelihood, this number will only continue to decrease. After all, in libraries that still have these apartments, they're generally seen as an embarrassment, not an asset. This is because these massive spaces are generally abandoned, in bad shape, and all not serving that much of a purpose. So as long as the funding is there, they will likely all one day be converted to modern usable space. Number 6. The world's highest apartment. Well, if you're rich and you want to have major bragging rights, then you could be the owner of the highest apartment in the world. That's because for a price of about $250 million, you can buy the 3-story penthouse at the top of the Central Park Tower. Spanning floors 129 to 131, it includes 7 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, 3 powder rooms, 2 kitchens, a private terrace, and multiple living and entertainment spaces. These are all connected by a gargantuan staircase, while floor-to-ceiling windows across the residence provide panoramic views of New York City skyline. This is all located at an altitude of 430 meters. A reference, that's about as tall as 4.5 football fields stacked on top of one another, making you feel like you're at the top of a mountain. If you're getting tired of the world's highest apartment, you can take a break by going down a few levels in the building to the world's highest private club. It's located on the 100th floor and creatively called the Central Park Club. Only members of the building can be part of it. Here, members that want to indulge can find a grand ballroom, a private bar, and a restaurant with menus from Michelin-starred chefs, a wine and a cigar lounge too. If they want to be a bit more active, they can instead opt to enjoy an 18-meter-long swimming pool and a private park. While if they want to unwind, they can chill in the residence's lounge or the screening room. Thankfully, if you're not insanely rich, there's a clever way to bypass all of this. You see, while the Central Park Tower may be the highest residential building in the world, it is located in New York City, which is only 10 meters above sea level. If you instead decide to travel to the Bolivian city of El Alto, you can be 4,100 meters above sea level. And if you simply rent a home atop its highest apartment block, you can pay far less than $250 mil. Number 5. Gustav Eiffel's secret apartment. The Eiffel Tower is easily Paris's most recognizable landmark. After all, millions visit it every year, and as you might expect, finding a flat or hotel close by will cost you a pretty penny. However, the Eiffel Tower designer, Gustav Eiffel, had first dibs on tower real estate, and he fully took advantage of this by creating a secret hideaway near the top. It's built on the 3rd level of the tower, about 300 meters in the air. The apartment was not large, however, it certainly had its charms. In contrast to the steely industrial look of the rest of the tower, Gustav Eiffel's apartment was complete with warm wallpaper, wooden cabinets, oil paintings, and of course a grand piano. Given that he was a scientist, it also had its own lab fit with some more high-tech gear of his era. This allowed him to both sleep and study in comfort. It is therefore fitting to this day that the apartment is completely off-limits to the public. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have a peek. After all, there's a window from the top floor so visitors can at least look inside. However, actually going through its doors is simply not allowed, no matter how large of a fortune you're willing to fork up. So, it's worth noting that Gustav Eiffel's apartment has not always been alone. That's because in 2016, the vacation rental website HomeAway was given permission to build a temporary apartment on the 1st floor. You see, in order to celebrate France hosting the 2016 Euro Cup, the company paid French designer Benoit Leloup to create a living space 57 meters above the ground. Inspired by Paris's iconic Haussmann style, Leloup transformed a former conference room into a 2-bedroom apartment, complete with a living area and terrace. Rather than charging a fee, a contest was held to allow for 4 lucky winners to stay there overnight. And while the apartment was certainly a cool concept and arguably should have been kept, it was promptly torn down once the Euro Cup was over. Number 4. The Campbell Apartment. Grand Central Station is, as the name suggests, quite grand. The epicenter of train activity in and out of New York City, the station was, and still is, a super important hub. And so it makes sense that the family who built a terminal built an apartment there. You see, Grand Central Station was constructed by the uber-rich Vanderbilt family, who were famous at the time for their vast railroad and shipping empire. Within Grand Central Station, they built a large apartment, and in 1923, this large apartment space was leased by financier John W. Campbell from William Kissam Vanderbilt II. Coming in at 3,500 square feet, it is a massive single room fit with 7.5-meter tall ceilings and an enormous faux fireplace, where Campbell kept a secret safe. In fact, at that time, it was the largest ground floor space in Manhattan, and as you might expect, Campbell made sure to make use of that space. While he never actually lived in the apartment, he quickly got to work making it a showpiece of his wealth, modeling it after a 13th century Florentine palace. He added finishing touches such as a hand-painted plaster of Paris ceiling, leaded windows, and a mahogany balcony with a quatrefoil design. He then got to work populating the space with high-value items, with these including an ornate piano and a pipe organ, plus a Persian rug that cost a modern equivalent about $3.5 million. Campbell used this space as an office during the day and a party space at night, where he would often entertain 50 to 60 people at private balls and recitals. Now, while Campbell certainly made good use of the space, when he died in 1957, his belongings were promptly emptied out. For a time, the space was converted into a signalman's office and later a transit police office with a small jail. Eventually, the transit police left the space and it was left in a state of disrepair until 1999. That's because it was in that year that $1.5 million was pumped into it in order to create a rather upscale bar, complete with a 1920s era decor and drinks. These repairs went even farther in 2006, when a further $350,000 was spent on a renovation that quickly replaced all of the blue furniture with red furniture. Reportedly, this was all done in just 12 hours, so that the bar wouldn't have to close for even one night. In any case, this lavish, old-money bar now mostly consists of financiers and business commuters, making it a fancy place to grab a drink while on the go. Number 3. Habitat 67. 1967 was a big year for Canada. After all, it marked the 100th anniversary of the founding of the country, and in order to celebrate, an exposition known as Expo 67 was held in the Canadian city of Montreal. Designed by the then master's student Moshe Safdie, it was tied to his thesis titled A Three-Dimensional Modular Building System. The aim was simple: how could high-density urban housing be made in a way that felt suburban? The answer was Habitat 67. Now, in essence, Habitat 67 is a housing block made of 345 cubes and rectangular prisms. Each of these has access to the roof of another cube or prism, where a private garden and a seating area is located. This gives each apartment its own backyard with a view of the St. Lawrence River, while also making the whole complex have a very futuristic look. As you might expect, this experimental design was quite thought-provoking, and it proved so iconic that it was one of the only buildings not to be torn down or repurposed after the Expo 67 was over. Yet, despite being more or less universally loved, what was supposed to be a mission to transform urban architecture ultimately failed. The idea never caught on, and today you'll have trouble finding any other apartments that look like Habitat 67. Well, why, you may ask? Well, despite having an assembly line production process that looked super efficient, the overall cost was a lot higher than originally anticipated. This caused costs to balloon, and in order to make up for the project going over budget, the government made the rent so high that very few people could afford to live there. Maintenance was also costly. According to one resident who lived there for 3 years more than a decade ago, water had gotten into the concrete and created mold that seeped into the ventilation system. This in turn made the air quality so awful that the residents' health took a massive hit. When coupled with the economic downturn that would come during the 1970s, the money for experimental projects like this that was Habitat 67 simply dried up. However, the future that it offered, the idea that the middle-class homeowners could live in a structure like Habitat 67 instead of fleeing to the suburbs, was a noble one. But given how little interest there is in making structures like this one today, it seems like suburban sprawl will likely continue to be a problem. Number 2. The Odeon Tower Penthouse. Now, while many penthouses claim the title of being the most expensive, the priciest one that we could find is the Odeon Tower Penthouse in Monaco. As you may know, Monaco is the crash pad for the ultra-rich. A principality on the southeastern coast of France, the area is known for its luxury vehicles, fleets of private yachts, high-roller casinos, and a complete lack of individual taxes. It's these features that pull in wealthy people from across the globe, and so it makes sense that a penthouse in this high-income area is extremely expensive. Considered to be the tallest building in Monaco, it was the first skyscraper to be built there after a ban in the 1980s. While this makes it a controversial building, its existence is no problem for its residents, who live in a 170-meter-tall monstrosity that has 49 floors, 259 residences, and a full wellness center, fitness center, and a pool. And while these great amenities come included for all residents, it's the top of the tower that's the true pinnacle of luxury. Now, to live here is extremely impressive. After all, it costs no less than $440 million to buy the unit. Yet what you get for the expense is absolutely incredible. Coming in at a total of 5 stories tall, the penthouse comes complete with a rooftop deck, massive circular infinity pool, and a dance club that's got a water slide going right through it. There's of course several bedrooms, bathrooms, with each bathroom having a rainfall shower, marble jacuzzis, and floor-to-ceiling windows. There's also 3 bedrooms specifically designated for the staff who come with the apartment, with this staff being tasked with cleaning the place, driving you around, and cooking meals out of one of your 5 kitchens. But this leaves us with one question: who were the people behind the one and only most expensive apartment on Earth? Well, those people would be the members of the famous Marzocco family. Originally hailing from Italy, for 3 generations they've been involved in property development in Monaco. While the family business started out rather small, after one of the family members was captured by the mob in Italy, most of the clan decided that it was right to take a move to Monaco. It was then that their business flourished, and today the Odeon Tower is the Principality's first apartment complex to offer residents amenities such as hotel-style concierge, swimming pools, and chauffeur-driven cars. It really did set the standard for luxury living. As a result, the building and the family behind it have now an international profile that extends far beyond the borders of Monaco. Number 1. Vienna's public housing. Now, at first glance, calling Vienna public housing incredible may sound strange. After all, public housing is usually government subsidized, and most of the time it's some of the cheapest and the worst housing in the city. However, the city of Vienna has managed to do things a bit differently. To be clear, public housing in Vienna is still public housing. That is to say, it's low-cost accommodation available to the poorest of the poor. But unlike other cities, Vienna has managed to get rid of the stigma around it to make this housing some of the best in the city. You see, with the exception of the fascist period, the city of Vienna has been governed by the left-wing Social Democratic Party ever since 1919. And from 1919 until the beginning of fascism in 1934, the party adopted a simple yet radical idea that housing is a basic right. In order to ensure that this right could be fulfilled and that everyone could have access to housing, the government began not only building units through both public and public-private partnerships, but also made sure that the units were of high quality. The goals were for these apartments to be as similar to private apartments as possible, meaning they were not just places to live, but also contained beautiful open courtyards, grocery stores, kindergartens, and libraries. These facilities prevented them from becoming ghettos and made them attractive to the middle classes, helping to create both steady demand and pride of ownership. However, beyond just creating great places to live, Vienna also stands apart for maintaining a continued commitment to this project. That's because from 1945 until today, money has continuously been pumped into the system to create new social housing projects and maintain the old ones. While this has meant that the municipal taxes are quite high in Vienna, the results have been astounding. You see, while there is an income cap for living in one of these apartments, it's so high that 75% of city residents qualify, and today, more than 60% of Vienna's citizens live in public housing. These apartments have been seen as so important that when new developments are made, the city can and generally does mandate the private developer to set aside the majority of the new apartments for the public housing scheme, while also allowing those who will live there to have a say in how the new building will be constructed. It's thanks to these continuous efforts that a 350 square meter, 1-bedroom apartment in the heart of Vienna comes in at just $370. Which is insanely low given the fact that wages in Vienna are quite high. So therefore, it's undeniable that Vienna is a world leader when it comes to public housing. It's also because of this system that Vienna is one of the few major cities on the planet that simply does not have a problem with high rent prices. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you to our channel members.